Major Garrett, yes, CBS, yes, hi.
Ladies and gentlemen,
please welcome Major Garrett.
From the nation's capital,
Major, fantastic.
it's The Takeout.
Major.
With CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent,
Major, that's nonsense.
Major Garrett.
And you should know better.
Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. I'm Major Garrett, host and creator of this amazing program known as The Takeout, where, as you know, dear listeners and viewers, we are two things each and every week. What are those two things? One, relentlessly curious. Second, steadfastly non-ideological and non-partisan. We're in a very special place today, and I am consumed with a sense of humility. Sometimes you, in your life, get a chance to meet someone you've long admired from a distance. I'm getting that opportunity, that blessing today. We're in Flint Hill, Virginia. It's in suburban Virginia, if you will, kind of outside, well outside of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. We're in the library of a man named Ron Maxwell, who wrote and directed one of my all-time favorite movies, a movie called Gettysburg. He's written and directed other movies, Gods and Generals, Copperhead, but for me and for millions of Americans, Gettysburg is and will always be his seminal work. Gettysburg is, as the title certainly suggests, about what I would argue and contend are the three most important days in American history, the hinge of history for our entire country. All that was at stake in the Civil War, in my opinion, came to a crescendo those 3 days in Pennsylvania. Had the outcome been different, our country would have been different. Had a sense of duty, honor, courage, and valor been distributed differently, our country would have been different. And Ron Maxwell and everyone associated with that motion picture did that heroic work, preserving for our country and for all time a movie rendering of these three crucial days in American history. Ron, I can't tell you what an honor it is for me to be in your presence, to be here and to begin this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I've seen the movie at least 50 times. I have a ritual that my children know well. Everyone who knows me closely knows well. I watch this movie every 4th of July, right around the 4th of July. It's a good 4.5 hours. It's worth every moment of it. But I revisit that because revisiting it is to understand, for me at least, what America's about, how America was one thing before the Civil War and it was a different thing after that. And it was an argument among Americans about what the country would no longer be and what its future could be. And so much of that is encapsulated in the movie. So I've spoken way too much. Ron, I just want to give you a chance to talk about the movie, what it means to you, and what you hope it will always mean for this country.
Well, I read Michael Shara's book in 1978. It had been published in 74.
Called Killer Angels, won the Pulitzer Prize.
The Killer Angels. It's a work of fiction, even though it was well researched. It's a work of fiction, and it won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 75. I read it in 78, and I was immediately gripped. I didn't know how profoundly I was gripped, and I didn't know that it would start a 15-year saga for me. But within months of reading the book, I optioned it, met Michael Shara, the author. We became wonderful friends, and thereafter started working on the screenplay. And by 80, I had a screenplay, and from that point on was trying to get the movie financed.
I want to play for you, and pick up your headphones so you can listen to yourself on this. I want to play soundbite number 1, which talks about the book and the effect it had on you. This is from a documentary called The Making of Gettysburg. That's number 1, Sarah.
It grabbed me on in the subconscious place first. The way a fine piece of music can grab you, and you don't know why, but you're captivated by it.
I'm fascinated by the use of your term subconscious, because Shelby Foote, one of the great American chroniclers of the Civil War in narrative form, said the Civil War lives in our subconscious forever. It is on our subconscious nationally, whether we want to acknowledge it or not.
Yeah, it's there, and because it permeates our society in terms of the lives we lead, in terms of our politics, in terms of our art and culture. in terms of our language and our literature. It lives with us. And so at some point in our lives, if we're lucky, we focus on it. We see what is there with clear eyes, and that's when we start to read books about it or see movies about it or become more conscious of it. And it moves from our unconscious awareness to our conscious attention. And we see what a rich story it is. And so, and what I discovered along the way, and I discovered immediately when reading Michael Sharra's novel, are these great characters, and that's what Michael Sharra's achievement was, to enliven those characters, those historical figures, and also give them wonderful dialogue. So my job as a screenwriter then was to take that novel and translate it into the cinematic medium, and it was it lives. The curious thing about the Civil War, which I found for myself in making these 3 movies that I've made, is that the Civil War is at one time is absolutely uniquely an American experience, for sure. There's these Yankees, then there's these Confederates, and they're in these places and they fight these battles. But in another way of looking at it, which has informed how I've made the movies, is that they're archetypes. That what we're seeing has been played out before in human history, and sadly will be played out again, which is fratricide. And the other side of the coin, the French have a saying called l'envers du médaille, the other side of the medal. The medal has a shiny side and a dark side. The dark side is fratricide, the shiny side is brotherly love. And all 3 films, and certainly in Gettysburg, that is explored. You see men who love one another, who are willing to die for one another. And I think my friends who are veterans of Vietnam, my generation, and veterans since, it's one of the things that they recognize in the film, is because it's something that they experienced when they were in battle.
It's so true, and there are so many poignant moments in Gettysburg where the soldiers, the men who had fought alongside each other before the war, see each other across that deadly space and are heartbroken in anticipation of what's to come. And that is one of the more gripping elements of the movie. And to your point about Michael Sharra giving these characters voice, he demarbleized so much of the Civil War in the process, because the marbleization of the Civil War through monuments is a way to just sort of put it out of reach and to bring it more to the human condition. I want to run 2 sound bites real quickly of actors who played in Gettysburg. Jeff Daniels was the actor who played Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. Stephen Lang played General George Pickett. Let's run those back to back, Sarah, 2 and 3.
You get a sense that, this is a sacred piece of ground, and there's a great sense of responsibility to this gig. It's not just doing a job.
This was a war about ideas. That, I think, is the most moving thing about it, that this Army of the Potomac was not to get land, it was not to get loot, and it was not to crown their own king. It was about an idea. And I think that it's worth examining again. And I somehow suspect that's why a lot of these reenactors do what it is they do, to find the validity in being an American in a way.
Ron, you know the actors took this seriously. This was a different kind of endeavor for them, but Stephen Lang mentioned the reenactors. Describe briefly what the reenactors meant to this movie.
Well, there's no question in my mind that Gettysburg could not have been made the way it was made without the reenactors. In the 15 years it took to make the movie, the approach that I thought we had to follow when I started in the early 80s was to go to Eastern Europe and rent an army, because that's how Waterloo was made by Dino De Laurentiis. It was made in the Ukraine, I think. So I went to Poland and I went to Hungary in the 80s to see if we could rent an army to get thousands and thousands of soldiers. It was just impractical to do it in the United States.
I'm going to stop that thought right there because we need to go to break, but we're going to get more on the reenactors and how happily this movie was not made in Ukraine, but in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I'm Major Garrett. We're in the library of Ron Maxwell in rural Virginia, having an incredibly marvelous time. I'm Major Garrett, back for segment 2 in a second.
And you have reenactors who do Yankees and reenactors who do Confederates, and some what they call galvanized. They go both ways.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
Thanks for joining us. Rural Virginia. The location precisely is Flint Hill, Virginia. Even more precisely than that, the magnificent library of Ron Maxwell, the writer and director of Gettysburg and many other Civil War-themed movies. In his library, we are doing a little bit to show some modicum of respect for the main combustibles of the time, or comestibles of the time. We have some biscuits here. We have a little bit of beef jerky. That's kind of homage to hardtack and something that would have been approximating beef jerky. This golden liquid, all I will say is it's what goes with branch water, okay? And then we also have some coffee. So that's about as close as we can get to what you would pack in if you were on the move.
We're roughing it today.
Yes, we're roughing it as much as we can. So continue the conversation about the reenactors, how many of them were there, and what role did they play in not only appearing, but giving the movie a core level of humanity and authenticity.
Well, by the late 80s, after I'd been working on this project for a while, two things happened in about the same time. One was the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the Berlin Wall in '89. So any idea of working with hire an army in Eastern Europe went right out the window. The other thing that happened, luckily for us, was the emergence of the reenactor movement. Reenactors do all sorts of wars. They do 1812, French and Indian War, American Revolution, but the biggest number of reenactors then and now is the American Civil War. And you have reenactors who do Yankees and reenactors who do Confederates, and some what they call galvanized. They go both ways. And they build their own uniforms. They're not called costumes, they're called impressions. And they're meticulously accurate to the regiment, to the time, to the state, to the unit. So in fact, a reenactor is a living Civil War historian. They really know not just about their regiment, but about the character that they portray. And as I say, some do Yankees and Confederates both. They'll do infantry, they'll do cavalry. The cavalry guys have their own horses. The artillery guys pool their resources and build their own cannons. These are expensive endeavors. You can imagine the commitment to this hobby. And their wives and girlfriends are involved too.
Yep.
So, and they also have what they call the impressions, the dresses, the skirts, the hoops, the hairdressings of what the Civil War would have looked like. So in addition to the battle reenactments, they'll do balls and civilian reenactments and medical reenactments. There's a whole range of things. It's a whole interesting subculture in American life, and it's across the whole country. So we were finally able to take advantage of this in the late 80s, early 90s when we were planning to do this movie. And on the day, we recruited, in Pickett's charge, there are 5,500 guys. It's not CGI. There's no CGI in Pickett's charge. That's 5,500 guys, which we had for a week. Took us 6 days to film just Pickett's charge. And the beauty of these guys is that unlike CGI, when you see like masses of people moving around, I can move the camera in anywhere, any place, anytime, and you're in 1862. Because it's not just that they have the uniforms, they're thinking 1862, 1863. They're there. And if you don't believe me, and I know you do, but if somebody's not believing what I'm saying, here's what happened. One day on the set, during that week, the early part of the week when we were filming Pickett's Charge, the troops coming out of the trees in formation. Yes. That was the only actors we had that day were Armistead, Kemper, and Garnett. Those
right.
three actors, because those are the division commanders. No other actors were on the set. They were all reenactors. It was hot. It was humid. July day in Gettysburg. On the battlefield, on the actual field where Pickett's Charge.
Never been done before.
Never been done before. And it was so hot, and the crew was running out with the Gatorade, trying to keep these guys hydrated. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we can get Marty Sheen to suit up? It was his day off.
Yes.
Suit up and come out on Traveler, his horse.
As General Robert E. Lee, who he played in the movie.
Just to be do a favor to the reenactors, give them a little boost. So I asked Marty. He could have said, "I'm busy. I'm doing that." He said, "Fine." And that's a big deal. That's like 2 hours in makeup, with the wig and everything before he could come out. Great guy. And so we're filming. It was the afternoon, and he comes riding out on Traveler, and we're lining up a shot, and spontaneously, at that particular day we had like 2,000 guys. They just started cheering, Lee, 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 Lee. It's like I got a hold of the case when I was the cameraman. I said, roll. You know, I said tail sticks, and you know, instead of at the front, you do it at the end.
Right.
You know, and they had to get the paper cups, and the crew's running around. And they got roll, the rolling sound, and we captured this event. It was what in the '60s we called the happening.
Yes.
It was uncanny.
Right. Because they were in character. That's what would have happened.
That's what would have happened, and Marty was deeply moved. I mean, he realized in that moment he wasn't Martin Sheen. They weren't there because he was Marty Sheen, the celebrity. They were there because he was Robert E. Lee.
Right.
And we rolled. Luckily, we had a whole magazine in because this is before digital. This is motion picture film. And we rolled. It wouldn't stop. And so we rolled out for like almost 10 minutes. And Case is motioning to me like there's no film left, so we didn't even get tail sticks. We have to sync it up later. We stopped, and we said, okay, changing the schedule. What we had on that schedule for the remainder of the day, we'll move it later on. We have now a new scene in the movie.
Yes.
And we just, we blocked out, we then covered that scene. So we redid that with different camera angles for the rest of the afternoon. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, and it was a scene that was not in the script. And it's a testament that could never have happened, with all due respect, with professional extras. It would never have happened with a hire of the army, rent an army. It could only have happened because of those reenactors.
You have unintentionally brought me to a soundbite I want to play from the movie. Sarah, this is number 6, because it speaks to something that General Lee knew that Martin Sheen, playing General Lee in the movie, gives voice to, and I want to run it now. Number 6, Sarah.
Soldier has one great trap. To be a good soldier, you must love the army. To be a good commander, you must be willing to order the death of the thing you love. We do not fear our own death, you and I, but there comes a time. We are never quite prepared for so many to die. We are prepared to lose some of us, but we are never prepared to lose all of us. And there is the great trap, General. When you attack, you must hold nothing back. You must commit yourself totally. We are adrift here in a sea of blood, and I want it to end.
It's a very emotional scene to watch in the movie. It always chokes me up. General Lee was beloved by his men. He was feared and respected by his opponents. And that encapsulates one of the great hazards of being a successful general, and does so beautifully. You wrote those lines, I suspect. What does it feel like to hear them again? And to play off what you just described, the spontaneous thing of the reenactors who immersed themselves in that history as well, and that part of General Lee's character.
Well, I'm glad it took 15 years to make the movie from the time I read the book till the time it came out in theaters, because the Civil War is such an emotional, devastating event in our history. When you consider 700,000 men were killed outright or died, some died of a disease, but 700,000 dead, another 1.5 million terribly wounded, the entire South devastated, entire towns burned to the ground. You must approach this with some sense of humility and understanding the tremendous loss that was suffered, the tremendous sacrifice that that generation suffered. North and South, blue and gray, black and white, man and woman. That whole generation, our ancestors, paid a horrific price to sort things out, because prior generations couldn't figure out how to sort things out nonviolently. There's a profound lesson there for us. We have to solve our problems with civility, because when we stop listening to one another, when we start dehumanizing one another, this is the hell that can result.
And I'm going to stop you right there, and we're going to go to break. And on the other side of the break, I want to pick up that thought with your other movie, Copperhead, which is what you just described as the central theme within that movie. I'm Major Garrett. We're in Ron Maxwell's magnificent library, and we'll be back in just a second.
And so it's an exploration of dissent when you're the one person saying no when everybody else is saying yes. And that's a dangerous position to be in.
What are you labeled as?
Traitor.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
Welcome back. We've had a microphone check because we're experimenting with a little bit of new technology here at The Takeout. We had lavalier mics. That's a term of art in our business. Now we got the handhelds because they'll be a little bit less scratchy. So we're working through things here. But we're in the magnificent library of Ron Maxwell here in Flint Hill, Virginia, talking about not only the movie Gettysburg, but a movie he's also recently made called Copperhead. Before we went to break, you were moving in that direction. Please continue.
Well, one of the reasons I made Copperhead was because in both Gettysburg and Gods and Generals, the exploration was, and the question was, the cinematic question was, why do good, honorable, ethical, moral men choose to go to war? There were a lot of sadists and nasty people in the Civil War, just like there are in all wars, but that's not what interests me. Other filmmakers should explore that.
And some do.
And some do. I'm interested, when I started the Gettysburg, in where would my friends be? Where would my father be? My father was a World War II veteran. He was a really good guy. Mm-hmm. He enlisted in 1942. Like so many others, he may not have come back. He was in North Africa. He was up the boot of Italy. Savage fighting. He was in the U.S. Army Air Corps. He lived to tell the tale. But he was a good guy. He was an honorable guy. He was no sadist. And so what interested me in the American Civil War, I wanted to find those people. And we found them. We found them wearing blue and wearing gray. Honorable, ethical, moral people who chose not only to risk their life, but to kill. This is a big choice.
Yes.
And so both movies explore that. So when I got to the end of that, I said, what about the good, honorable, ethical men who choose not to go to war? Again, there are shirkers, there are cowards, there are deserters, there's all sorts
There are people who bought their way out of the Civil War?
All sorts of negative stuff, which should be explored in motion pictures, but that's not what interested me. I wanted to know where the strong, ethical, moral guys were. And I found such a man in the novel by Harold Frederick that was written in 1899 about a fellow living in upstate New York. Abner Beach is the fictional name, but based on real events, who decided the Civil War was a mistake. And he didn't want to sacrifice his sons to go into the charnel house of the Civil War. There were many people like him on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. There were people in the North who said we shouldn't be fighting, and there were people in the South who said we shouldn't have seceded, we shouldn't be fighting. Someday, other filmmakers, I hope, will explore that, the anti-war element that was in the South, because it's a great story. Well, I explored in Copperhead the anti-war element in the North. And so it's an exploration of dissent, when you're the one person saying no when everybody else is saying yes. And that's a dangerous position to be in.
What are you labeled as?
Traitor.
And what is the psychological process that ensues?
Well, Copperhead is about what happens in a town up in the North. And it happened all across the North, as it happened in the South too, of a community that's divided and turns against itself over politics. Divided over politics and how they dehumanize one another, even within the context of a small town in America.
Starts with not listening. It
begins with not listening, with not crediting the other person's point of view, with not respecting the other person's point of view. And it's a form of mental tyranny that we're all susceptible. We're all susceptible of this, thinking we've got it all figured out. And the other guy's point of view is not just different, but it's immoral, it's unethical. It's not worthy of consideration. And once we go down that road, it's a dangerous road to go down. There's a quote from the Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which I love, and I'm going to butcher it, but it goes something like this. He said, if it was only so easy, if we could just take all the bad people and separate them from the good people and put them over there and deal with them. But that's a fallacy, because the line between good and evil cuts across the heart of every human being. This is the battleground, right here in our own hearts.
Getting back to Gettysburg, you talked about the characters. I want to play a soundbite now. Sarah, this is number 12. Jeff Daniels plays Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain on the other side of the soundbite. He's speaking to Sergeant Buster Kilrain, who's part of his 20th Maine Regiment. Play that now.
What a piece of work is man. How infinite in faculties, in form and moving. How express and admirable. In action, how like an angel.
Well, if he's an angel, all right then. But he damn well must be a killer angel. Colonel Darling, you're a lovely man. I see a vast, great difference between us, yet I admire you, lad. You're an idealist. Praise be. The truth is, Colonel, there is no divine spark. There's many a man alive, no more of value than a dead dog, believe me. And you've seen them hang each other the way I have back in the old country. Equality. What I'm fighting for is the right to prove I'm a better man than many of them.
You'll hear it in my voice, folks. This movie hits me at so many different emotional levels, and I almost never get through that scene in one piece emotionally, because it talks about so many things central to the human character behind those who chose to fight, as you said. And these two men are in the same regiment, on the same side, fighting for the same cause, and yet have a fundamentally different interpretation of mankind, of humanity. And that, to me, is so moving in the movie.
What a piece of work is man, how noble in form and reason, how like an angel. That's, of course, from Hamlet, from William Shakespeare. And Michael Shara put that in the character of Chamberlain, which was entirely plausible because Chamberlain was a professor of rhetoric and language and religion.
At Bowdoin College in Maine, yeah. He's
Bowdoin.
not a soldier.
No, he's a professor. And so it's perfectly plausible that he would be able to reach out for these thoughts and think about the nobility of man. And Kilrain, who's the immigrant, he's the only fictional character in the piece. Kilrain is, I can tell you, because I've had long talks with him before he died, Kilrain is Michael Shara.
Okay.
That's himself.
Right.
So Kilrain is the only fictional kind of composite character, but he articulates a different view. He has a darker view. As he says, he's seen in the old country, he's seen people getting hanged on the corners. It's now the 1860s, so he saw the starvation in the 1840s and 1850s. He's seen the dark side of humanity. So he doesn't quite have the optimistic view,
this lofty interpretation of all that's possible,
that Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain had. But Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain matures too. He matures in the course of the film.
Yes.
When he has to order men into battle, and order his colleagues into mortal conflict, and he gets to see the dark side of humanity too, as well as the bright side.
The movie gets launched in part because, as leader of the 20th Maine, thrown into that quite unexpectedly, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain has to take on some other members of a Maine regiment who want to mutiny, which is, as I said comically in the movie, a naval term. He gives a speech to them to try to persuade them to join the 20th Maine. Sarah, that's number 11.
And all of us have seen men die. This is a different kind of army. If you look back through history, you will see men fighting for pay, for women, for some other kind of loot. They fight for land, power, because a king leads them, or just because they like killing. But we are here for something new. This has not happened much in the history of the world. We are an army out to set other men free.
And in that process, most of the Maine regiment members who want to mutiny, who don't want to continue to fight, in fact, follow Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. And where do they follow him? To the top of a place called Little Round Top. Geographically, I would argue, among the most significant places of topography in the entire arc of American history. Because, I'll put this to you, Ron, the battle hinged on what happened there on day 2.
Yeah, the Robert E. Lee and the Confederate Army, by this time in the war, were used to having victories. Robert E. Lee had 100%, probably 110% confidence in his men. He knew they could achieve anything despite the longest of odds. But on that particular on those particular 3 days, he ran up against men in blue who were not going to move. They dug their heels in.
And we're going to talk about more why they dug their heels in. I've got a great quote from Shelby Foote about what was different about fighting on their own land as opposed to being on Southern land in a second. I'm Major Garrett. We're with Ron Maxwell. Come back for segment 4 in just a second.
So on that particular day, Hood's Texas and Alabamians went up against these stubborn guys from the 20th Maine who put up one hell of a fight.
From CBS News, this is The Takeout with Major Garrett.
This is one of the epic experiences of my life, I'll tell you that right now, ladies and gentlemen. To be in the presence, the home of one of my cinematic and literary heroes, Ron Maxwell, creator of the movie Gettysburg, Gods in General, and Copperhead. We were about to get into the conversation about Little Round Top, Day 2, and why it was so crucial not only to Gettysburg, the battle, but American history every moment thereafter.
Right. Well, Lee was convinced that the federal forces had massed most of their troops in the center and on the right flank, the Yankee federal right flank. He had attacked the right flank the previous day on day 1, and so he thought the Yankee left flank could fold if he concentrated his energies and his military prowess at that end. So he directed General Hood and General Longstreet. Well, he directed General Longstreet, and then Longstreet directed General Hood, and that's all in the movie in great detail, to go attack the federal left flank, which was hanging. It was hanging just north of these two hills, Little Round Top and Big Round Top. They had not occupied those hills at that point. So the Confederate plan was to occupy those hills and then turn the flank and rout the Federal Army.
Sweep over them.
Sweep over them. Had that happened, there would have been an open road to Washington, D.C., and the plan was to force the federal government to talk.
And maybe engage in peace.
And peace
negotiations.
Talks.
Yes.
Because there would have been no major army between the Confederate Army and the capital. They would have been forced to evacuate, perhaps. So, and remember, they were surrounded on all sides because Maryland was a slave state, and many Marylanders were fighting for the Confederacy at that point. So Lee's plan was sound. The problem, it was thwarted because on that particular day, you had these guys from the 20th Maine who were assigned to go to that extreme left of the line, and they were commanded by this college professor, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. And he had the remnants of the 20th Maine, which was already decimated by previous battles, which he talks about in the clip you showed earlier, plus the mutineers who had decided to stay on after that stirring, rousing speech he gave, reminded them of why they were in the war and what was at stake. So on that particular day, Hood's Texas and Alabamians went up against these stubborn guys from the 20th Maine who put up one hell of a fight, and that, of course, is captured in the first half of the movie. As we know, Gettysburg has an intermission, and the last 45 minutes before the intermission is the battle on Little Round Top, which was some of the most. The whole war had ferocious hand-to-hand fighting, but if you want to get a sense of how close that combat was, that's what we tried to capture in that sequence.
The violence and the proximity of not just the shooting part of the war, but the intimate, face-to-face pugilism of the war with bayonet, with rifle butts, and everything else.
And you get a sense of how completely committed the soldiers were on both sides. It was an absolute hellish frenzy when they got engaged at that close range.
I want to play a clip from Shelby Foote. This was part of a C-SPAN interview on one of his books that was taken from his 3-volume set, but it talked about the Army of the Potomac, the Federal Army in Gettysburg, and why it might have been slightly different for them than it had been in so many previous other engagements or scraps. That's number 4, Sarah.
The Army of the Potomac had one great advantage. They were fighting on their home ground, an advantage the Southerners had through most of the war leading up to that. One Confederate said, "I believe the damn Yankees shoot straighter in the North than they do when they're down south."
Shelby Foote has such an amazing and memorable way of not only humanizing, but in some ways giving a humorous lilt to something that is so savage and difficult. I don't know if they shot straighter, but there was a sense that the stakes could not have been higher for the North, and that might have contributed to that sense of resilience on day two.
Yeah, and there's some great moments in the dialogue that Michael Shara put in, the wonderful dialogue when he has the general who designates, deploys the 20th Maine, and he tells Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, "Now we'll see how professors fight."
Right, yes.
Because he was from Harvard,
yeah.
and Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain was from Bowdoin, and then of course there's that moment when Chamberlain decides they're completely out of ammunition. There's nothing to do but retreat at that point.
But that's not an option.
And that's not an option because his commanding officer said, "Fight to the last."
Fight to the last.
And he does it: last bullet, last man, last drop of blood, last. There's
an exercise in rhetoric.
Exercise in rhetoric, he says, being a rhetorical professor of rhetoric. And he makes that decision to the swinging door. And of course, the
bayonet charge down the hill.
The officers around him have to kind of like check what is he really talking about, and you can see this. It's played beautifully by the supporting cast. There you can see the wheels turning. There's no time. They're going to get attack number 6 or attack number 7. Yep. They're all going to die in a few minutes, basically. And he then says, "No, we're going to charge." So it is the most unexpected, unlikely, audacious military maneuver that he takes on. And that moment when he in the first take when he says bayonet, and usually on movies what you hear a director telling an actor is less.
Right.
And after he did that one take, I said, "Jeff, more." He looked at me, his eyes got big. More? He probably never heard a director say that in his life. And the second take is the one that's in the movie, the one that makes your blood chill.
It does. It does. It is an exhilarating, amazing moment of cinematography. I want to play one soundbite from you from the Making of Gettysburg documentary. This number 9, Sarah.
I think that it'll be a healing experience to see this film. It should be. I think that through all the death and destruction and murder and mayhem and the tragedy of it all, there will be a catharsis, again coming back to the Greeks, and it'll be very healing to relive what our ancestors lived through and to feel it as a part of who we are as a people.
That's the aspiration of the film. In my opinion, it accomplishes that and exceeds it. But before we leave the main 4 segments of the show and go into the Tuesday Takeout Outtake Especial, I want you to take a minute to talk about the healing and that it's not easy to do movies about the Civil War because we're still so subconsciously unsettled about it.
Well, the war settled some things. It absolutely held the Union together. That was the original aim, the Northern aim. It started out because the South wanted to secede, form their own country. The Union wanted to hold the country together. That was decided. We didn't have 2 nations. We had 1 nation at the end of the war. The second thing that was decided, the war aims switched in 1862 after the Battle of Antietam and the Emancipation Proclamation, which was put into effect on January 1st, 1863, the Day of Jubilee. Incidentally, it was celebrated for decades and decades as a big holiday in America. That emancipated the slaves. So by the end of the war, in the 13th and 14th Amendment, which immediately followed on the war, these were the 2 big immediate achievements of the war, results of the war. The Union stayed together, 1 country, and African Americans were freed. But all the underlying issues were still there. Does sovereignty lie in the state or in the national government? Does sovereignty lie with the individual or with the government? And every single debate we've had about the size of government, what government should do, what it shouldn't do, what it should leave to the states, We're still there. We're still debating all those things in the present moment. The other issue of race, very much a part of the discussion in America, hasn't gone away. It ebbs and flows, but it's with us. How do we resolve this question? How do we get to the place that Martin Luther King talked about, where we don't judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their heart? We're still working on that. So all these issues that came to a violent confrontation in the Civil War are still with us and still part of the American character. And another thing that the war brought out, which is very much a part of the American psyche, is the dualism of the American character that, on the one hand, like Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, wants to go and free people, liberate people, and the other part of the American character says we should be minding our own business. This is also a contemporary debate, which is very much alive today. Should we still have 8,000 troops in Afghanistan? What the hell are we doing in Afghanistan? That's one argument. Another argument is, no, we owe it to those people. We can't let the women go back into the servitude they were in under the Taliban. So we still have those issues as Americans, the Crusader American and the live and let live, mind your own business American, was very much the duality of the American character.
Ron Maxwell, it's been an amazing pleasure for me. We have one more segment, but this ends one part of our show. Thank you for your time. It's been
pleasure.
A great, great pleasure. I'm Major Garrett. See you next week. Well, this has been The Takeout from the Flint Hill, Virginia magnificent library of Ron Maxwell. Please meet and say hello to Bandit. The Takeout Outtake Especial is next.
People are so hyped up on these subjects that if they hear the slightest thing that they don't agree with, they're ready to attack somebody.